there, everyone. Sometimes we look at people and think they just got lucky or they got a hookup from an uncle or a dad. But the truth is, irrespective of who you are, where you are, or what you've been through, you can make it and do amazing things. I am so thrilled to have with me Ken Kaniu, the CEO of Britam Asset Managers, who's going to be sharing with us his journey that I think is so amazing. So stay tuned and listen to this amazing journey. Hi, Ken.
Hi, Rina.
Thank you so much for accepting to do this interview.
Great, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. So I wanted us to start from the beginning and just hear about your background, because I mean, you're such an amazing person who's done amazing things, really, really knowledgeable in the field of finance and investment. Right. And I've watched you literally grow.
That's right.
We were in high school together, except I was ahead of you.
No, that's right.
And it's just been amazing to watch your journey.
Right.
And I am totally inspired, and I admire the way that you've, sort of just come into yourself in your journey. Right. So let's take a few steps back.
Okay.
And tell us about your upbringing and your family of origin.
Okay. Thank you for having me, Rina. I've just turned 40, so that has given me some pause for thought and just some time to reflect on the journey that I've taken. So I do think that this interview is wonderful because it has allowed me to be able to do that.
And happy birthday.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. It was about maybe a month and a half ago.
Oh, really?
That's
just?
Right. Oh, that's right. So still enough time to receive a gift.
Yeah, it's coming.
Thank you, Rina. Yeah, so I was born in 1980, which is a strange time because for someone who's 40, in some respects, you're seen to be fairly old and advancing in age. But in other respects, I'm still seen to be fairly young. So amongst my colleagues and peers and so on and so forth, there goes the young guy again.
Yes.
And amongst maybe other people, 40 is too much. And 40 is simply too old. And by the time I turn 40, I think I'll be in my grave. Those are some of the comments that I hear from others. It's a strange age. But nevertheless, if I talk about my origin and upbringing and so on and so forth, I guess it was what I'd call fairly routine and normal. So we grew up in what I'd call the early 80s, doing all the normal stuff that people do. So, it's the age of black and white TVs becoming color. So very excited about kiddie macho and football made in Germany. We were all eating the goodies, the nice toffees and so on and so forth, playing a lot outside. I wouldn't really, especially when I was younger, in primary school and so on, I don't think I would characterize myself as academically astute.
Really?
But I would say I was academically reasonable. Let me put it that way. So I started off in kindergarten. I went to Nairobi Primary School for 3 years, maybe 4 if I count the pre-primary and so on and so forth. So that is where I got my taste of the free milk, the Nyayo milk, which was lovely. I really enjoyed it. Maybe that is why the teeth are white. When I look at my kids, I wonder, are they really going through the same or not? So that was a fantastic experience. Yeah. And it was great being in a public school. You learn like everybody else. I got hammered like everybody else. In fact, those are some of the enduring memories that I then have. Yeah. And I then moved to a private Catholic school in 1990. Okay. So I think I was in class 4. So that was St. Mary's School. It was seen to be a good school, and I was very fortunate that my parents were able to afford to take me there. So I then went through the motions, played a lot of sports while I was there. I remained academically reasonable, so I did not progress from there. But, I went through KCSE and was quite excited to be done with school. Yeah, so that's when I realized I'm more analytical in nature. I think it took me a bit longer to work through the stuff. So I'd always question, why must the algebra be done this way? Does it even make sense? I'm not sure I understand it.
That's interesting, because when you take longer to understand something, the thinking for yourself and those around you is that you're slow.
That's right.
And so you kind of feel I'm not as fast as these other kids. So what gave you that insight to align that with the fact that you are naturally analytical?
Well, and to some extent as well, the questioning was seen as a sign of defiance. Why is he asking? you know, this is too much. Why can't you just do it like the rest can? So it made me think that, you know, maybe there's a different way of doing things. So I started to then find in myself that I seem to take my time, try and think through, try and come up with something that is logical and makes sense for me. So I realized that very early on, not even in my career, but in my development as a person, that seems to be how I was wired. Because remember, I'm doing that at the age of 15 and 16 and 17.
Okay.
And when I would then go through extra classes, then I would say, okay, so that is the way that it works. And then it would stick. So I found myself that way. I find my firstborn son that way as well. He seems to take after me also. And obviously, you are then able to deepen your thoughts and so on and so forth. So it kind of became natural that I would then, and I'll talk a bit about my career, then move towards investment management rather than banking, which is where I first started.
Right.
Because banking is banking, the rules are already set. You don't have too much room to move outside those parameters. But I found that with investments, you do. You have the time to think through. You have the time to reflect, and you have the time to come up with a reasonable, let me say, recommendation at the end of the day. I also, at school, seemed to like English for whatever reason. So I'm very fortunate that I was encouraged to read a lot of books, particularly in school and also at home. So I went through the whole Enid Blyton's series. For those who remember Enid Blyton. I went through Hardy Boys, went through Nancy Drew, went through Secret Seven, went through quite a bunch of stuff. So that was very useful because I later then realized that life is also about articulation. So it's not important for you to know what you know, it's also important for you to be able to communicate what you know in a language that people can understand.
But see, that's just too much maturity for me. I'm like, you are a kid. How are you able to just think in that way? Is that the way that you were brought up? Is it your parents who are, you know, sort of pushing you in that direction?
My parents' core methodology was if you don't do well, well, firstly, it's up to you. You really don't have anything here. Even these clothes that you have, they've been bought for you. In any case, you'll have to grow them anyway. It's not something you can say is even yours. So that was the methodology. Some people would argue maybe that is too harsh and so on and so forth. But that's the sense that I got. I even remember being asked many times, you truly, what have you done? You know, maybe you're on TV watching tennis and you're celebrating because once again, Serena Williams or Martina Hingis, those are the guys people who used to watch have won. So the message was, why are you even excited watching Martina Hingis win? Have you won? When you win, that's when I want to see you smile until that back tooth I can see you showing there. So that was the methodology. So that kind of made me and my younger brother realize, we're just two, that it's truly up to you. There's no safety net. You have to walk off and do something useful because there's going to be no real support at the end of the day, and you don't want to then look like you're the one who seems to have issues. I think that was the methodology. I think for the most part it seemed to work because we couldn't bear to contemplate the alternative, where truly you are battling, you've not done well in school, and so on and so forth. Those were also the days when everything was really academic, let me put it that way. The methodology was you do well in school and you go off and get what is seen to be a regular career. So you should be a doctor, or you should be a lawyer, or you should be a banker, and so on and so forth. Other professions and careers were frowned upon. So anything to do with your own innate talent was not looked at positively. So you want to become a sports person, why don't you have that as a hobby rather than contemplate that as a career? Or you're good in art and so on. It's good for you to be good in art, but truly, what do you really want to do in life? Media wasn't a big thing then. You know, that we were growing up watching Catherine Kazabuli. I mean, that was not something that a normal Kenyan aspired to, as an example. There was no social media at all. So that as a career was completely out. So in those days, it was quite rigid. It's not the way it is now, where truly you can say, I'm going to be in media. Or I'm going to become a guitar player. Or I'm going to become a painter. Or I'm going to become a DJ, as an example. And all of those are worthwhile careers. They now pay. You can actually raise a family on that and have grandchildren off the back of that. You can build a house, buy a car. You can do all the regular stuff. That wasn't available to us at that particular age, and for you as well, I'm sure. Yeah. That was seen to be maybe frivolous and too you're too self-absorbed. That's not the real world, you know. So that was the message that we all got. Yeah. And who knows, we could have been doing something completely different, particularly for me and my younger brother. But we are where we are. My mother was a civil servant. She was a civil servant for 35 years. And obviously for her, life was quite routine. You know, you clock in and you clock out and so on and so forth. And you look at a civil servant and a guitar player, you know, the two don't mix, particularly where a career then is concerned. Yeah. You know, my father was initially a corporate guy, more like me, but he quit after 10 years, despite having done very well in the auto industry, and went into business. So he then had his own methodology and view of life. And their view of life was, we just want these guys to grow up to be normal, stable people. I think that was the sense. So keep their noses clean, keep them out of trouble. Don't talk to girls. Girls are very bad. And also they should not talk to you either. So I always suspect maybe that is why we went to St. Mary's. Because remember,
there were no girls.
St. Mary's was an all-boys school.
Yes.
So in one way that is very good, but in one way that is also very bad, isn't it? So we got introduced to the world of girls very late. My mother was the only lady in the house. But to her, she's not a lady, she's a mother. Yes. So truly things are quite different. Yeah. But that is how we, I think that is how we grew up, in a very kind of, in one way normal environment, but in another way quite disciplined and structured environment. So I'd not really say that we lacked for anything, and I do give credit to them for what they did. There are some hang-ups that, of course, that I have, like we all have, to be honest, as a result of what then happened. But when I look at the whole thing on the whole, look at the whole balance, it seems to have worked. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, they did a great job. Yeah. All in all.
Yeah, all in all.
Fantastic. Thank you for that background.
Sure.
So, you know, were you always inclined to invest and to, you know, build your wealth and that sort of thing? I mean, you've been in the investment field for a long time.
Yeah.
Where did that come from, and where did you get your wake-up call? Not so much the career, but just that interest in being an analyst and investing yourself.
I wouldn't say that it was a wake-up call, because when you have a wake-up call, it means something bad has happened.
Yeah, true.
So I don't think anything bad really happened.
Okay.
It's just that, you know, so immediately I then finished high school, I went to USIU for university. And before I went to USIU, I then got my first job working at a Kenchic shop in Moy Avenue, actually the first one that was set up in Nairobi. So my job for 9 months was to bag chips and cut chicken and serve it. So very interesting.
So you know how to cut chicken properly?
I know how to cut chicken properly, that's the thing. Though that was many years ago, but yes, I was doing that for 9 months. So of course the nightmare was when someone would say, give me 30 fries and 30 chicken. I mean, Jesus Christ. I had to take some 30 minutes. So very interesting experience. And I then learned a bit about how to run a business and money as well. Because sometimes I'd run the cash register also. So you then learn that the money comes from customers, right? And the customer is just a normal person.
Yeah.
Come and ask you, give me a Fanta Passion and some chips. That's it. And he'll give you 100 shillings. But that 100 shillings will become 20,000 for the day. So you then realize that you need to treat these people well, otherwise they're not going to come back.
Right.
So we then had a lot of value adds. We had a lot of kachumbari that we used to serve. So we would cut up onions and tomatoes and so on and so forth and put it in these big like vases or dishes and put them strategically around the shop. And we realized they were a hit. It was free. Some people would come just for the kachumbari. So of course there was the big debate, are we going to chase them away or not? Yeah. We decided to leave them. So we then learned about decisions. We had initially seats inside the Kenchic, and then we realized to turn the tables faster is better that we have no seats, just, you know, those benches
Yes,
that are
I
there.
remember, yeah.
That's right.
You stand and eat.
Yes, you stand and eat and go, because we don't want you sitting there for 2 hours.
Yeah.
Remember, there's a line outside.
Right.
So you then learn a bit about the decision making. So I was there for 9 months, enjoyed myself. I had to throw away the clothes when I was done. They are unwashable after that and unwearable, full of oil and mafuta
Yeah.
and all that.
Yeah.
So then went into USIU and studied a normal business administration degree, nothing special about that. And towards the end of my university in my 3rd year, I then came across an association called AISEC, which I thought was very good. So it was a student activity in a student club. There are lots of student clubs. I just stumbled upon that one. But the benefit of joining a student organization is that you then learn a bit more. So obviously they have some HR function to organize members. You can take up a finance role. You can take up a marketing role where you engage with companies, or you can be the leader, or you can get involved in their core business. So I thought that was particularly useful for me now that I think about it. I didn't think it was useful then, but now I can see why it was useful. Because that is where I learned how to write a proposal to a company.
What role did you take?
I took on a role that was called incoming exchange. The core work of AISEC is to send Kenyans abroad to give them work experience and cultural experience as well, and also receive foreigners into Kenya and show them about our culture and also give them good work experience with companies. So my role was to actually receive the foreigners and make sure that they had placements within companies and also make sure they had a good cultural experience. So my role was to engage companies and NGOs and whatever it was and tell them the benefits of AISEC. It's great to have a foreign intern with you for 6 months. They'll come with a different culture. Because he's gone to university, maybe a different work ethic and different knowledge.
Right.
And by the time he leaves, hopefully there's some impact on your business. And we'll handle the work permit. You just have to pay him a little stipend and so on and so forth. So some companies thought it was great, and others thought it was just a waste of time. But you see, you learn how to write those proposals. You have to go and meet people. Others will just tell you this is a waste of time.
Yeah.
Others will tell you, well, I'll think about it. And others would proceed. So that to me was something very useful because I felt like you're part of a small company. So I thought that was great. You have to learn how to talk and to do a little public speaking and so on and so forth. So at the time it was just a little activity, but really now I can see the benefit of having gone through that because it gave me the confidence then to be able to proceed. And it's only now that when you reflect through that, you're able to appreciate the value of that.
Yeah.
But at the time I was just a student. You're 19, you're 20, I mean, really, let me just do it and move on, that kind of thing. But
They also give you networks.
It also gives you networks, that's right. And those networks are very useful also.
Yeah.
So when I then left university, I then took up a national role within AISEC, so responsible for all the universities in Kenya, again doing the same thing. You then take on more leadership, more decision making, but it introduced a lot of conflict between me and my parents. Principally because they thought that this is, you're in summary volunteering for a role in an association that doesn't pay, so we can't see the benefit.
Yeah.
And all your peers are off, either working or tarmacking or whatever. When are you going to start? In fact, these people are going to leave you behind, Ken. You'll always be 1 or 2 years behind because of this whole AISEC thing. So just quit and do something useful. And there was a lot of conflict because during my university years, I didn't live at university. I stayed off campus in Roysambu and Zimmerman and those areas. That was my decision to go and do that. So when I then went back home, of course, you are being reintroduced to your parents in a manner that is not also very good.
So conflict, because you've been independent for a while.
No, that's right. So every morning, wake up, take my matatu to University of Nairobi. That's where the office was located. Spend time there until maybe 8 in the evening and go home, that kind of thing. Or not go home at all. I would take every chance I could not to go home. I'm in a conference, I'm in a meeting, I'm in the sleepover, I'm in whatever. So it wasn't the best time, but I think for me very useful in as far as contacts, decision making, and just some level of responsibility. So when I finished up with my AISEC term in 2004, in mid-2004, I was fortunate that I immediately got a job through AISEC. Because I was in contact with many companies and all that, and I told them I was winding up, they're like, why don't you join one of our programs? So I joined CBA as a graduate trainee and went through the motions, sitting in branches. I was even a teller for a while, service delivery, blah, blah, blah. And I quickly realized that this is not what I want to spend my life doing, because banking is very regimented, banking rules. We don't want thinkers. What we just want is...
analyze what?
Yes, just count the money and go home. What's your issue? And even better, we have a camera above you, so it's okay. You don't have to worry. All your customer engagements, fine. Or if today you are approving RTGSs, well, there was no RTGS at the time. If you're approving these EFTs, just approve them and move on. We really don't need you. In fact, we have pre-printed the paper. So truly, just take the paper and use it. So I realized that's not what I wanted. I'm not very interested in counting other people's money, very regimented environment. So because I was responsible for hosting Kenyans here, I also had some contacts with other companies and countries outside. So I then came across several programs for several companies which were looking for international people. And of course, a Kenyan is an international person, isn't it?
Yes,
which I think is good. So I went through some interviews with several of these entities, oral interviews, written interviews, and so on. Unfortunately, at the time, I was studying for my CFA exams. So me and some fellow from France then qualified to join a company called Allianz in Germany, having gone through the application process. So I went there for just more than a year, and that is where I got to grip with investments. And you learn that people are keen about what they do. I then realized that there's no such thing as a generalist. You're supposed to be a specialist. And when you take your radio to be fixed, the guy who's fixing it understands radios deeply. He understands about radio waves and so on and so forth. So he'll do a good job. But he can't tell you anything about TVs. No. There's somebody else who does TVs. And as a result, he's then well paid because of the specialization. So in Kenya, you realize you take your radio to be fixed. The guy does everything, washers, cookers, phones, radiate, takes it apart, and puts it back in a manner that really doesn't make sense. So you realize people are very different out there. So I learned a lot about work ethic and all that. And I realized then I think investments is what I want to do, because you're paid to think through. It's really down to your own analytical ability and all that.
Super. So what was your first investment as Ken when you got back home?
Right. My first investment was made in the year 2006. I had just come back to Kenya from Germany, with Allianz. And lucky once again in that I was able to find a job. I was able to find a job because for the year that I was out, I kept in contact with people. So, hi, how are you? This is what I'm doing. This is what I'm up to. This is what I'm trying to do, blah, blah, blah. Merry Christmas to you and happy birthday to your young son and all that. So when I then came back, at least I had people to tell that I was back, which was useful. So one of them gave me an internship, which was great. And because he thought I was reasonable, it later converted into a contract job and then into a full-time job. So whilst I was going through that process in 2006, I then made my first investment in a company called Uchumi. I thought Uchumi was doing very well. I was a young analyst. I mean, I've just come from Germany, so I know what I'm doing. Yes. So not only did I invest some money, I also successfully managed to convince my mother and brother
to put in money.
To also put in money into Uchumi. So there were a lot of rumors swirling around the company. Management is not good. They are cash flow negative. And despite everything you see on the shelves and all the activity in the branches, there were rumors. The company at the time then changed CEOs. They brought in a white South African. I've never forgotten his name. His name was John Masterson Smith. I've never forgotten his name because he's the one who lost me the money, isn't it? So he then called a press conference and kind of just gave confidence to everybody that I'm here. This is my 5-year plan and it's going to work. So I looked at the press conference, thought he had a nice suit and all that. I believed him in summary, and we put in the money. I think a week later on Madaraka Day, for those who remember, the Uchumi closed. There were shut signs on every branch. In fact, it was shocking for the whole country.
It was shocking.
Uchumi has closed.
Yes, it was on every newspaper, every TV station.
And the company has been suspended from trading. Yeah. And what then later happened is that the government then decided to come up with a rescue plan. They put in some money. And the message to all of us as investors was that you have just lost your money. And it was horrific because prior to that, they had also done a rights issue, meaning they went to raise additional money from shareholders. So there are a lot of new investors and old investors who also put in money. So we all are left asking questions. You know, where was the management? And even the auditor at the time, who was he? That is when we learned about the CMA. What was the CMA then doing? So we completely lost all our funds. And I then, on reflection, then realized I didn't do the work. Because you see, I was perhaps overconfident. Relied in my own ability to just read the situation. I didn't do the work. I didn't do the research. I didn't look at the financial statements. I didn't ask around.
You didn't look at the financial statements?
No, I simply just invested because I thought that was the right thing to do. It's like now telling somebody, why don't you go and invest in our top performing company in Kenya? I think we all know that one.
Yeah.
Most people have not looked at those financial statements.
No, they're like, yeah.
I mean, surely. Is
Is
it going to collapse tomorrow?
No, it's too huge to collapse.
It's too
and
huge to
government
collapse.
owns it.
Absolutely. That's how we felt about Uchumi.
Yeah.
I mean, isn't the milk I'm drinking from Uchumi? Aren't I going back there tomorrow?
Right.
And I'm still going to find the same milk,
Yeah.
and so on and so forth. So that was this. Uchumi was that kind of company in 2006. They had a wonderful CEO who had just put in a very expensive ERP system. I don't know if you remember. I mean, it was going places, very modern. You know, inventory check. Who wouldn't have put money in Uchumi? So we all did. So I mean, so I learned a lot about taking your time, being patient, ask the right questions, look at the numbers. Don't invest because the guy looks good.
Yeah.
Or based on the reputation of the company. Because if you do that, there are only two options here. It can either go very right or go very wrong.
And for your family, I guess like your mom who invested, it's don't invest because your son has told you or your mother or your cousin is investing.
That's the thing, yeah.
You have to do your own work.
So it was a knock to my confidence because first of all, you say this is the career that you want, Ken. Eh? Just tell us about that again. How does this industry really work, Ken? Just explain to us once again.
Yeah.
No? And you say you even did this in Germany.
In Germany.
Yeah? Is that how it normally works? So not very interesting.
Yeah.
So it took me a while to recover from that. So you kind of tell yourself, never again. Never again invest or make a decision without going through the whole process. So you'd rather get a failure, but take comfort in the fact that you went through the process.
Right.
So it's fine.
Yeah.
And of course, the process helps you to avoid, hopefully, too many of those kinds of failures. But if you don't go through a process, then the chances of being scammed and conned and making a decision based on emotions and all that is high. And most of the time when you do that, it doesn't work. But when you do, you become a bit more logical, then you realize you're able to catch some of these things early on. You can't catch everything. It's not even expected that you catch everything. But if you catch 80% of them, that's good. That's normal. In investments, 20% of them have to be bad. So it's not a perfect environment. But if it's the other way around, where 80% of the money is lost and 20% of the time you're right, then there's something wrong with what you are doing. So if the first one is a total loss, then that's not very interesting. So the guys even remind me until today, oh, you know, Ken, we once lost some money. It's a very nice and very, very interesting.
Yeah. Okay, super. And then, so now I want us to go into your journey to being CEO. I mean, you became CEO quite young,
right?
In an industry that is full of older, more, experienced people.
Yeah.
How did you get here?
Right.
In summary.
Yeah. I would say in summary, it's very interesting. I went against the grain a lot because I started off in Kenya with a company called Stanbic Investments. It was part of the Standard Bank Group.
Yeah.
So I started as an analyst, and every 1 or 2 years, I had a serious opportunity to change jobs.